Hey guys, tonight we drift into a dusty, sun-bleached landscape where the sky crackles with potential and beetles are treated like sages. You're standing barefoot in the highlands of ancient Ethiopia, squinting up at a stubborn sky dry and taut like old leather. The villagers beside you are quiet, their breath barely stirring the warm air, but their eyes flick downward to the dirt where something far stranger than weather instruments is crawling. You've come looking for rain, though you probably won't survive this drought without a little magic. Or well, biology. Same thing, really. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a plateau cracked like a turtle shell, your feet dusty, your tongue dry, and in the distance just barely, you hear a faint buzzing. The locals are whispering about beetles again. Not just any beetles, special ones, rain beetles, sacred bugs that can somehow smell the storm days before it comes. Or doesn't. You've never wanted to believe in insect oracles until this very moment. Your guide, a wiry man with hands like tree bark, leans in and mutters, "Watch the dirt. His name is Mulugeta. He's already shown you the fields that used to be green and the rivers that used to be rivers. Now he gestures toward the earth as a tiny shiny beetle scuttles across a stone, casting a faint glimmer under the pale sun. You see how it walks?" Mulugeta asks. "They say if it walks fast and in circles, the clouds are coming. If it digs straight down, no rain." You raise a skeptical eyebrow but don't say anything. Frankly, the beetle's doing both, which probably means the weather forecast is maybe possibly unless it changes. Better than some apps. The villagers gather in silence. There are no phones here, no radars, just observation and memory passed down like old recipes. You watch a young girl press her ear to the earth as if the soil might speak to her. You hear nothing but cicadas. It's not like Ethiopia is short on history. This land has seen empires rise and dissolve into sand. But what's stranger is that tucked between records of kings and battles are bugs. Beetles appear on ancient amulets, in old songs, even on fragments of pottery unearthed near the Tekeze River. Some historians argue these aren't weather omens at all, that the beetles were just household pests or spiritual symbols. But others note consistent carvings of the same oval shape with little radiating legs, always next to depictions of rain. Coincidence, maybe. Maybe not. Your mind drifts. It's too hot to think straight. You're starting to see what Mulugeta means when he says the sky listens differently here. You lean against a crooked acacia tree and squint at the beetle again. Why a beetle? It's not the kind you're used to. This one glows faintly green, almost metallic. Its antennae twitch as if tuning into some hidden signal. You swear it pauses mid-scurry like it knows you're watching. Back in your world, beetles are background noise, compost bin citizens. But here they are headlines. The villagers bring out shallow clay dishes filled with warm sand and herbs. Into each dish goes a single beetle, handpicked and handled like a rare gem. The dishes are spaced along the village edge like altars. Children crowd around, wide-eyed. Elders sit legs crossed, nodding solemnly. Everyone's waiting, not for a voice from the heavens, but for the bugs to move. And they do. Some skitter in tight spirals. Others push tiny pebbles in strange arcs. One beetle appears to just freeze in place, legs twitching, body humming faintly. Mulugeta whispers, "That one hears thunder from the north." You nod, as if this makes perfect sense. Rain is precious here. Predicting it can mean planting your seeds at the right time or watching them die. The elders won't say they worship beetles, but they treat them like weather priests. Patterns have been recorded, observed for generations. A beetle walks left after sundown rain in 3 days. 2 beetles fight near the grain store's drought. A dead beetle on your doorstep. Someone's been cursed, or it's just a bad Tuesday. You feel strangely invested in the tiny twitching performance happening at your feet. You realize you're holding your breath. Still, you wonder what science says. And surprisingly, there's something. Some beetles do respond to humidity and atmospheric changes. Their exoskeletons can pick up shifts in barometric pressure. Entomologists today even acknowledge that insect activity sometimes increases before storms. How they know is still debated. Some say it's electrical charge in the air. Others think it's the low rumble of thunder carried miles underground. But that doesn't explain the patterns. the beetle runs that trace ancient symbols, or the way elders claim they never lie unless you're not listening right. A few skeptics point out that correlation doesn't mean causation. Maybe the Beetles are just doing Beetle stuff, and humans have projected hope and hunger onto their tiny backs. Historians still argue whether this was early meteorology, or just magical thinking with legs. You sit on a woven mat as the sun starts to sink, and the beetles scurry with renewed energy. The air shifts. It smells faintly of iron and soil. You remember a time as a kid before a thunderstorm when the air got that same charge like everything had paused. No one speaks. Even the children are quiet. The bugs are doing something new. One by one, they start digging. Not chaotically, but deliberately. Like dancers ending a routine. Mulugeta closes his eyes. Tomorrow, he says. And you believe him. The sky hasn't changed color, not yet. It's still a hazy sheet of pale blue, like someone tried to erase a storm but didn't finish the job. But the people of the village begin moving with purpose. You trail after them, your sandals crunching over dry stalks past thorny bushes and smooth bone-colored stones. They're heading to a clearing at the edge of the settlement where a series of clay jars have been half buried into the ground, like sleeping giants. Each jar is about the size of a basket rim, lined with what looks like soot and crushed herbs. Some are capped with tight bundles of animal hide tied with sinew. Others are open to the sky. They've been warmed by the sun all day, and as you approach, you notice thin threads of smoke coiling lazily out of one. Not thick, choking smoke, but a soft spiral that smells like cinnamon bark and damp moss. These are for the ritual, Mulugeta tells you, crouching beside a jar and lifting its lid with reverent slowness. Each one has a beetle, or sometimes two if it's a year of hunger. You raise an eyebrow. 2 beetles means more power. No, he says, lips twitching with a smile. It means we're more desperate. He gestures for you to sit on a low stone ringed with old ash. You do. The ground is warm. The beetles are still inside their jars, nestled in what looks like compost and ash mixed with flower petals. The petals are pale blue and white frangipani maybe, or something like it. You can see one beetle already climbing the side of its jar, tiny legs tapping the clay like impatient fingers. Around you, the villagers have formed a loose circle. Some sit, some stand. A few begin to hum low tones that buzz at the bottom of your spine. It's not music in any formal sense. No instruments, no rhythm. Just a thrum like the earth itself has a sore throat and is trying to clear it gently. An old woman with braids down to her waist steps forward. Her face is crosshatched with wrinkles so deep they look carved. In her hand she holds a curved piece of bone that glows faintly in the firelight, polished smooth with years of use. She places the bone beside one of the jars and begins murmuring something in a language you don't recognize her voice. Soft, her tone almost scolding. Mulugeta leans over. She's asking the beetle to speak clearly tonight. You resist the urge to laugh, not because it's funny, but because it suddenly feels a little too real. Like the air here has rules that don't apply anywhere else. Then she lifts the beetle gently from its jar. It's a fat one with shiny black shell and red-tinged legs. It wriggles but doesn't try to flee. She places it on a circular mat etched with symbols that look burned into the fabric. Concentric rings, jagged lines, dots like constellations. The beetle pauses. Then it begins to walk. You watch mesmerized as it traces a path from the outer ring inward. People murmur. Someone behind you whispers west wind, and another hums in approval. The old woman nods and carefully scoops the beetle back into its jar. The next jar is uncapped. Another beetle. Another trail. A different pattern. This one scuttles in a lazy figure 8, pausing at the edges of the mat. Someone clicks their tongue. He hesitates. Mulugeta mutters. Not good. It goes on like this. Jar after jar. Beetle after beetle. Each pattern is interpreted, each movement assigned meaning. You think of tea leaf reading or tarot cards. The same symbols, but spun through biology instead of mysticism. You wonder, are the beetles just wandering random motion? Or do they actually sense something scientists would tell you, that insects respond to pressure, to temperature gradients, maybe even ion concentrations? But here it's about behavior, ritual, rhythm. One scholar once suggested that ancient rain rituals were simply coded agricultural calendars in disguise, that people used beetles in song not as literal prophecy, but as seasonal memory aids, a story you tell every year to mark the shift in wind and sun. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were sincere weather forecasts or symbolic pageantry. You'd like to think it's both. After the final beetle is released and recaptured, the bone tool is passed around the circle. Each elder touches it to their forehead, then to the clay. You don't ask why. It feels impolite, but Mulugeta later tells you, the bone belonged to a rain priest. A long time ago, they say he could speak to beetles and hear the answer in his bones. You don't push for a scientific explanation. Sometimes mystery is the point. The fire burns lower. The villagers begin to scatter. Some gather near the water jars. Others retreat to their homes quiet and slow, as though the ceremony has taken some invisible toll. The beetles are returned to their burrows deep in the cool earth beneath the clay. Before you stand to leave Mulugeta hands, you a small piece of obsidian flat and warm. Put it under your pillow, he says. If you dream of thunder, the beetles were right. You slip the stone into your pocket unsure if you'll actually try it. But when you finally stretch out to sleep in a guest hut woven of reeds and clay, you feel the hum of beetle legs still crawling behind your eyes. And somewhere outside under the stars, a jar vibrates faintly in the night. The night is warm, but not unkind. A slow breeze teases the edge of your sleep, nudging the edges of your woven blanket. Somewhere outside, something scrapes against the clay soft rhythmic. Not alarming. Almost soothing. You half dream of beetles rolling tiny orbs of cloud through the dirt, pushing the sky into motion. You rise just after dawn. The sky is the color of old linen, still dry, still hesitant. The earth crunches beneath your sandals as you follow Mulugeta back toward the edge of the village. Today, the oracle will appear. No, not some mystical bearded figure. The Beetle Oracle. Mulugeta explains it like this. There is one beetle who does not belong to any jar. He lives alone. When he comes out, he tells us what the others could not. You're skeptical. It's early. You haven't had coffee or even the Ethiopian version, which, by the way, is about 3 times stronger than anything you'd dare drink on an empty stomach. But curiosity pulls you forward. The oracle's chamber is nothing like you imagined. No elaborate altar, no golden cage. Just a large circular hole lined with smooth stones shaded by a patchy acacia canopy. At the center is a lump of hardened soil shaped almost like a miniature termite mound dotted with small holes. One of these holes you're told belongs to him. No name, just the one. The villagers gather around slowly, reverently. Not many, just a few dozen. Children are kept back. This beetle is not for play. Then, as the sun lifts its tired face over the hills, he appears. You barely see it at first. Just a shimmer, a twitch. Then, unmistakably, a black-shelled beetle emerges, dust clinging to his limbs, antennae feeling the air like a cautious prophet. He moves slowly, intentionally, spiraling outward from his mound. You lean in. Everyone does. It's eerily quiet. Mulugeta whispers. 3 full turns, then a pause. You watch as the beetle turns once, twice, 3 times. Then it stops. Still, motionless. People nod. You whisper. What does it mean, rain within 2 days? Mulugeta replies as if reading from a weather app. It's absurd. And yet, the air smells different. You didn't notice before. Like wet bark and moss and something electric in the distance. The villagers begin to hum. Again. Not a chant, just a low vibration of approval. As if their throats are tuning forks. You don't know the notes, but you feel them. The oracle beetle shifts again, retreating slowly back into the earth. Show over. Later, someone brings a shallow bowl of grain. Porridge spiced and comforting. You eat slowly, your thoughts tangled in antennae and weather. The oracle, you learn, isn't a specific species. He's simply the beetle that chooses the mound year after year. When he dies, another appears. Or doesn't. Some years they say there's silence, no emergence. And in those years, the droughts are harshest. You wonder if it's a superstition built from coincidence or an insect instinct beyond your understanding. Entomologists have long observed that certain beetle species respond to microclimatic changes long before humans detect them. Humidity, pressure, vibrations underground. But this is different. It's not just data, it's performance. You remember a paper once referenced by a half-bored professor about insect behavior before monsoons. Something about beetles abandoning burrows hours before rainfall. Some scientists tried to replicate it. Results were mixed. Historians still argue whether the beetle rituals were based on these observed behaviors, or if humans simply attached meaning to the scuttling, because they needed something, anything, to believe in. One particularly fringe theory suggests beetles were programmed through generations of selective breeding by ancient weather priests, that each oracle beetle carried the instincts of dozens before it. That would require an insect eugenics program, one no archaeologist has yet proven. But the locals nod sagely when you mention the idea as if to say, yes, of course. What took you so long to realize? You take another bite of the porridge. It tastes like cinnamon and dust. Someone hands you a small carved token wooden beetle shaped. For the journey, they say. You tuck it into your pack and ask what happens next. We wait, Mulugeta says simply. If the beetle was wrong, we prepare for another ceremony. But he is not often wrong. He smiles like someone who's lived through enough storms to tell the difference between faith and foolishness. You glance back at the mound. It's silent again. But something lingers in the air, a stillness charged with promise. You think about how odd this would sound back home. Today, a beetle told me the weather. People would laugh. But standing here, the logic feels less far-fetched. After all, beetles have been around for hundreds of millions of years. They've survived the dinosaurs, outlived empires, and danced through eras of flood and famine. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe it's not magic at all, just attention. Because that's the real ritual, isn't it? Watching, listening, noticing. A skill that modern life, with its distractions and deadlines, has let slip through our fingers. The villagers drift away to begin their day. Some head to the fields, others collect water. A few stay near the mound just in case the beetle reappears. You linger too, not out of belief. Not yet, but curiosity and a creeping quiet awe. The wind shifts slightly, tugging at your sleeve. Far in the distance you hear it, the faintest rumble. Not thunder exactly, but something that might become thunder if given the chance. You breathe in deeply, and the scent of rain is just barely there. You don't move for a while. The rumble fades if it was ever there, and the sky remains the same listless sheet of bone white. Still, the promise of rain lingers on your skin like static. You trail behind Mulugeta as he leads you toward the eastern edge of the village where the ground dips into a dry ravine. You're headed to meet someone who they say speaks Beetle fluently. You expect a scholar, maybe a shaman. Instead, you meet a grandmother. Her name is Asabash, though the children call her Nani, which apparently means both grandmother and the one who knows too much. She greets you barefoot with a laugh like crushed leaves crouched beside a basket brimming with dry roots and insect shells. Come, come, sit like a beetle. Close to the ground, she says, patting the earth next to her. You must not speak louder than a whisper. They are listening. You obey, unsure whether they means the beetles or the children peeking shyly from behind her hut. She pulls out a shallow clay dish and empties its contents of fine dust, a few beetle wings and an old broken sandal strap. A little shrine to patience. Then she carefully selects a beetle from a carved gourd, tied with a loop of fiber. It's smaller than the oracle beetle paler, with gold-tinged stripes on its back, like an ancient warrior's armor. This one, she says, is good at love. He only appears when two people are about to marry during the rainy season. You try not to smile. She's serious. Asabash places the beetle gently on a frayed square of cloth covered in charcoal dots and lines. At first, the pattern looks like nonsense random scratches and symbols. Then you begin to see something more: arcs for wind triangles, for clouds, beetle prints burned into the cloth itself. It's a map, or an almanac, or a weatherboard for the antennid. The beetle begins to move slow, deliberate. It circles once, then crosses a line marked with what might be a symbol for rising wind. Asabash hums low in her throat and leans in. He hesitates near the dust line. She mutters more to herself than to you. That means there's confusion. Perhaps split winds. You glance at the sky. Nothing split about it. Just plain consistent dryness. Still, the way she watches the beetle like someone reading poetry, not science, is oddly comforting. You find yourself leaning into, looking for clues for meaning in the twitch of legs and the angle of an antenna. It's absurd and strangely hypnotic. Asabash picks up a small stick and traces a spiral in the dirt beside her. They do not walk randomly. Never randomly. There is a story in their steps. You must learn to listen with your eyes. You nod, trying to appear wise, but mostly you're wondering how many years it takes to learn Beetle. 10, 20, or a lifetime of simply watching the children gather closer now, emboldened by your foreign awkwardness. One holds out a captured beetle cupped in his hands like a prize, its struggling legs flailing, but otherwise unharmed. Let it walk, Asabash says. Let it show us something. The boy tips his hand, and the beetle drops onto the dust with a soft tap. It rights itself and takes off in a zigzag pattern, stopping twice before digging briefly, then moving on. The children giggle. See, the boy says proudly. That means we will get little rain but enough to fill the puddles. Asabash raises an eyebrow. Or it means your hands are too warm and he's confused. You laugh with them. Then Asabash turns serious. But sometimes they do speak truly. You remember 2 seasons ago the beetles moved in a wide arc toward the riverbed. We thought it was just hunger. But 2 days later, the river swelled. You nod slowly. Historians remain split on this kind of storytelling. Some say it's post-rationalization, that human minds look for patterns in everything, especially survival. Others argue it's a real skill passed down through observation and experience. That, in a land where satellites are silent and forecasts unreliable, reading insects is a pragmatic act, not a mystical one. Asabash waves away the debate like a fly. They always argue. They do not sit on the ground. They do not watch. You think of all the noise that modernity brings. Forecasts with percentages, apps with push notifications, and yet most of us can't smell a storm until it's dripping down our necks. Here, the knowledge is quiet, personal, embodied. You spend the next hour with Asabash watching beetles navigate her cloth chart like tiny prophets. One falls off the edge. She shrugs. Even beetles get tired. Eventually, she hands you a small strip of the cloth, folded neatly tied with grass twine. This is a piece of their language. Not for answers, only for remembering. You tuck it into your satchel beside the obsidian stone and realize you're starting to collect a strange kind of travel journal objects, not written in words, but movements and impressions and antennae gestures. A slow language spoken through tiny legs. As you prepare to leave, Asabash pats your hand. Tonight, if the air feels heavy, listen. If the beetles dig, listen harder. You smile and thank her. As you walk away, the children trail behind, trying to teach you a song about beetle dreams and rainy feet. You hum along off-key, but happy. And somewhere behind you, a beetle turns one last slow circle on a cloth dotted with forgotten wisdom. You're walking back through the village, a folded strip of beetle language cloth in your pocket, when something catches your ear, not thunder, not wind, but rhythm. A kind of gentle stomping in time, like distant drumbeats wrapped in laughter. You follow the sound past clay homes and grain baskets until it opens into a wide clearing, where a crowd has gathered around children dancing. But this isn't just dancing. They're bent forward at the waist, arms flung wide like legs, feet scuttling in loops and curves. Their fingers twitch like antennae. And in the dirt beneath them, etched out in careful lines, are beetle trails preserved from this morning's ceremonies. The kids are imitating them. You pause at the edge of the circle. An older boy notices your curiosity and waves you in. Come, he says. Dance the rain path. You hesitate, then step forward. What follows is part improv, part memory test, part joyful nonsense. Each child picks a trail and follows it with their body, stepping along spirals, hopping over crossings, spinning at sharp turns. Every beetle path becomes choreography. Every pause in the trail is a chance to freeze mid-step, arms out like wings. It's strangely beautiful. Funny, yes, but reverent too. The trails in the dirt are like sheet music, and the dancers become living notes moving in time with something older than drums. These are the rain dances, says Mulugeta beside you. He arrived quietly, probably watching from the shade like a sneaky parent. The children learn the beetles' movements first with their eyes. Then they remember with their bodies. It clicks. The dances aren't random, they're memory rituals. Mnemonics disguised as play. One girl finishes a perfect spiral and lands flat on her back, laughing into the sky. Another drags a stick through the dirt to create a new beetle path, then tries walking it backwards. This one, Mulugeta notes, is the circle before digging pattern. It means slow rain. Good for planting onions. You chuckle. Do they always work? He shrugs. Not always. But the rain listens better to laughter. There's no arguing with that logic. Historians have often struggled to classify rituals like this. Are they agricultural, religious, performative? Some dismissed them entirely mere folklore. But recent work has suggested these dances may encode local climatology. Passed down through generations, they form a living record of which patterns preceded which weather. In places without paper, the body becomes the book. And here, children are both students and scribes. The dance continues for nearly an hour. New paths are drawn. The older kids test the younger ones. What does this curve mean? Which way is the digging leg? You realize that even if the Beetles stopped coming, the knowledge would survive. In feet, in laughter. Eventually, the shadows lengthen. One by one, the children peel away to rest in the shade. A few lie on their backs, arms out, pretending to be flipped beetles in the sun. You sit beside a boy who's drawn a perfect trail with his heel. He points to it and says, "Tomorrow, we do this one." It's for the wind that carries seeds. You nod solemnly. Important wind. He grins. Also, it's fun to spin. Mulugeta joins you with a carved gourd of water. You sip gratefully, dust thick on your throat. This is how they learn. He says, "We don't hand them books. We hand them beetles." You think of your own education: glowing screens, dense textbooks, graphs, and apps. All brilliant. All useful. But none of it ever made you want to dance in the dirt with your face to the sky. Nearby, the older boy who invited you in begins to hum. The others join, voices light and fluttering. The melody is call and response, simple but haunting. You catch a few words. "Beetle, beetle, tell the mud, is the rain asleep or awake?" One child replies in song. The mud says, "Hush." The sky says, "Wait." And then the chant fades into giggles. Mulugeta taps the earth. Sometimes we learn things best when we forget we are learning. You lie back on the warm ground, eyes scanning the pale sky for movement. A hawk glides high above, silent. No clouds yet, but the breeze has shifted. It smells softer, less dry. You wonder how many centuries of beetle dances have unfolded under this sky. How many children have stomped spirals into the soil while their elders watched, hoping that somewhere in the mimicry the rain might feel invited. Historians still argue whether these dances predate organized agriculture or were invented as part of it. Did people begin dancing to the Beetles before they planted seeds, or only after they realized rain brought life? You suspect the question doesn't matter to the children. All that matters is this: when the Beetles scurry, they follow. When the sky remains silent, they hum. When the dust is too dry, they draw maps of hope with their toes. And when tomorrow comes, if the rain falls, you won't be surprised if the children take credit. They'll say, "We danced the path," and the grown-ups will smile and nod and say, "Yes, you did." You close your eyes at the sound of small footsteps fading behind you, and for a moment you feel the world shifting slightly toward water. Later that evening, after the laughter fades and the dust has settled into sleepy layers, you find yourself perched near the edge of the village, legs dangling from a flat boulder, still warm from the sun. The air has changed. It's not cooler exactly, but thicker, textured with something you can't quite name. And then it hits you. Petrichor. The smell of earth longing for water. That wet mineral scent, subtle and nostalgic, as if the world just remembered it used to be a swamp. You take a deep breath. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning a little incense, perhaps. Just habit, perhaps. Part of tonight's preparations. Behind you, small rustling noises emerge from the brush. Not wind. Beetles. Digging. You hop down from the rock and kneel to watch them. Tiny legs pushing soil aside like they're late for an appointment. One digs with such conviction that its back half lifts from the ground before disappearing entirely. Another pauses, antennae twitching furiously, then vanishes straight down like a coin dropped into loose dirt. Mulugeta appears beside you, crouching low. They're telling the soil to be ready. He says this with the certainty of someone reciting a bus schedule. "You mean they dig when rain's coming?" Only then he nods. Or when something underground frightens them. But usually it's rain. You'll see. They know. And it's true. Scientific studies have shown that some beetles begin to dig when humidity rises even slightly. Others respond to shifts in soil moisture or ambient electrical charge. There's a species of scarab that reportedly always digs 36 hours before rainfall. No one knows how it knows. Some claim it's magnetism. Others whisper about microchanges in pressure or vibration. Historians still argue whether the ancient rituals were symbolic, observational, or simply hopeful mimicry. But the villagers here don't debate, they just watch. Mulugeta points to a patch of freshly turned soil. That one's serious, he says. The hole is deep far more than the beetle's size would suggest. You catch sight of a faint glimmer, its back still visible gleaming in the dimming light, before it disappears entirely. You notice now that many villagers have gathered silently at the village's edge, eyes low, watching the ground. The older ones hold small bundles of herbs. A few hum under their breath. No ceremony, not yet. Just attention. It's strange how quiet it is when dozens of people collectively hold their breath. One of the elders walks by with a clay bowl filled with what looks like river sand. They pour it gently onto patches of cracked earth. You ask why. The sand helps them dig more easily. The clay is tired. It needs help remembering how to drink. You nod, not sure if you're talking about the Beetles or the land. A girl no older than 10 taps your shoulder and beckons you to follow. She leads you to a shallow depression just outside the beetle mound from earlier. She's drawn a diagram in the dirt loop's arrows, concentric ovals. It looks like a target or a vortex. This is the dream of the beetle, she says. You blink. You mean, what they dream. She giggles. No, what the beetle is dreaming. The difference is important. She explains that when beetles dig, they aren't just preparing, they're sending a message to the soil. A sort of pre-rain whisper telling the roots below to wake up, telling the worms to start moving, telling the tiny fungal webs to get ready. It's poetic nonsense. But you believe her. Later, as dusk descends and the heat breaks just slightly, Mulugeta tells you how his grandmother used to sleep in the garden the night before a storm just to listen. She claimed the roots made a sound, a groaning, stretching sort of noise as they prepared to drink. Could be worms, he admits. Could be memory. The soil is a sponge, he says, but only if it remembers how to be one. The beetles remind it. You lie down, belly to earth, ear pressed to the ground. You hear your own breath, the distant whine of an insect, the occasional crunch of someone walking softly nearby, and something deeper, a faint clicking like faraway rain that hasn't yet decided to fall. You wonder what it would take to pay attention like this back home. To the ants in your sidewalk, the cracks in the pavement, the changes in the air when a storm is still a rumor. Here even children know how to read the ground. And beetles are not pests. They're translators. One last beetle surfaces near your elbow circles once, then begins to dig. You track every motion, tiny legs flinging grains of dirt in tight arcs. It's not frantic. It's purposeful, like the earth handed it a to-do list. When it finally disappears, leaving only a thumbprint-sized hole behind Mulugeta's size. That's 5 tonight, he says. Tomorrow? Maybe. You sit up slowly. The sky overhead is the same dull canvas. No stars yet, no thunder. But the smell of petrichor has thickened, and you realize the beetles aren't predicting rain. They're participating in it. Morning arrives slow and golden light trickling over the hills like honey on a warm plate. The air is cooler, not cold, but with just enough softness to make you question yesterday's dryness. The village begins to stir smoke, curling lazily from cooking fires, the sound of wooden spoons clinking in ceramic bowls. You stretch under the acacia sparse shade, brushing dust from your arms. There's a low buzz in the air, not from flies, not from conversation, but something else. A kind of waiting that hums at the edges of things. Mulugeta finds you again, as he always seems to do, carrying a small bundle wrapped in woven reeds. Inside are 6 beetles, alive, squirming, shiny. Today, he says, we test their vision. You blink. Their vision. He grins. Their eyes see things we cannot. You follow him toward the rise, overlooking the valley, where a strange structure has been built, something between a sundial and a beetle racetrack. It's a circular platform, painted white with char lines, running from center to rim like a pie cut, too precisely. In the center is a hollowed bowl where one beetle at a time will be placed. They see the sky differently, Mulugeta explains. Through their eyes, the sun is a map. The clouds are doors. The wind is visible. You've read something like this before, scientific articles about insects using polarized light to navigate. It's especially true of beetles in desert or savanna climates. They can detect the angle of sunlight through special photoreceptors in their compound eyes. What looks like plain blue to you becomes a glowing net of direction and signal to them. Some researchers even believe scarabs use the Milky Way for orientation, literally rolling dung in a straight line by starlight. You look at the platform again. It's no joke. The first beetle is placed in the bowl. The villagers scattered around the circle fall quiet. The beetle twitches, turns once, then begins walking, Not randomly, but precisely toward a line marked with a triangular notch. Northwest, someone says softly. A second beetle. Same spot. It pauses, pivots, then scuttles due west. A third beetle spins, waits, then chooses southeast. A murmur moves through the watchers. Not concern, but interest. Anomalies matter. Mulugeta whispers. When they all agree, we know the wind. When they scatter, we watch the sky more closely. It makes a strange sort of sense. If their vision is truly tuned to sunlight angles, then sudden shifts in their navigation could suggest changes in cloud cover wind current or even electromagnetic fluctuations. Not prediction perception. You crouch beside the platform and watch the fourth beetle start its run. It wobbles, at first circles twice, then charges straight north. Mulugeta tilts his head. That one was unsure. You watch the beetle disappear over the rim, its legs kicking up fine grains of ash-colored sand. The fifth and sixth beetles offer no consensus. One turns circles as if chasing a ghost. The other digs a shallow trench and refuses to move. The villagers exchange glances. Storm confusion, someone murmurs. Later back at the hut, Mulugeta spreads out a folded cloth marked with tiny squares. Each square, a hand-painted beetle symbol. Some are basic, a dot with 4 legs, a curved arrow above it. Others are complex swirling lines, jagged trails, footprints overlapping circles. This is our sky chart, he says. The beetles walk across it, and we track the message. It's not far from how meteorologists use isobars and fronts, just more tactile, more immediate. You ask if the chart is always the same. No, he says. Each family has their own. My grandmother's had 16 wind paths. Mine has only 8. Some say this is not enough. Others say too many confuses the message. Historians still debate whether these charts were standardized across communities or passed through lineage, like songs. No 2 excavated cloths or stones in earlier times have ever matched exactly. Yet all hold similar symbols, spirals, arrows, dots, zigzag lines. A shared language with regional dialects. The debate between natural behavior and intentional communication never ends. But here it doesn't need to. You ask how one learns to read a beetle's path. Mulugeta shrugs. You watch. Then you guess. Then you remember. And if you guess wrong, the crops die, and you guess better next time. He smiles to soften the weight of it. But the truth hangs in the air. Beetles aren't just weather advisors, they're survivalists. Their behavior is recorded, discussed, debated, and passed down like heirloom seeds. You remember your own weather lessons. An app, a push notification, a panicked TV anchor waving at digital storm clouds. Here the clouds are read through legs and light. You walk back to the beetle platform in the afternoon, alone this time. The wind has picked up slightly, enough to flutter the edge of your shirt. You kneel, press your hand to the ground. It's still warm. A lone beetle scuttles nearby, moving in a slow arc, then climbing over a ridge of dried grass. It pauses, turns its body toward the horizon, then continues without hesitation. You wonder what it sees. To your eyes, the sky is still flat and pale. But maybe to beetle eyes, the sun has split. The wind has curled. The air has softened its stance. You sit there long after the beetle disappears, letting your breath match the silence. And you wait. You wake before dawn, stirred not by light, but by a faint vibration like something rustling beneath the world's skin. You lie still in the semi-dark, ears pricked not for footsteps or voices, but for a much smaller kind of noise. Scritch, scritch, pause, scritch. It's the beetles again. Outside the village still sleeps. The sky has taken on that deep cobalt hue right before sunrise, when everything looks dipped in ink. You slip out quietly and follow the sounds through the sleeping compound past the burned-down fires and the fragrant ghost of last night's stew. Mulugeta is already awake. Of course he is. He's crouched near a low stone wall, tracing something with his finger, etchings on the surface faint but purposeful. These, he says without turning, are our oldest maps. You crouch beside him and run your hand along the stone. The carvings aren't decorative. They're diagrams, concentric ovals, lines like sun rays, clusters of tiny dots. All beetle-shaped. Some of the carvings form geometric patterns that resemble star maps. Others look like beetle tracks overlaid on wind spirals. This one, he taps, is from my grandfather's time. He said the beetles always moved in this shape before heavy storms. And this one He shifts to the side, pointing at a triangle with jagged lines running through it, meant lightning. You blink, you carved storm behavior into stone. He nods. So we remember what the Beetles told us. A breeze picks up whispering against the carved grooves. The stone is warm from yesterday's sun, but the wind is cool, a contrast sharp enough to notice. Mulugeta presses his palm to the pattern with quiet reverence. The Beetles walk like this when the air is ready to burst, he says. It's not the only stone like this. As he leads you further up a nearby slope, you begin to see more flat rocks embedded in the earth like stepping stones, each with its own set of beetle-inspired glyphs. One has a central spiral with small arrows shooting outward. Another has rings nested like raindrop ripples, with what might be beetle legs pointing inward. Some archaeologists would classify this as ritual art. Others might lean toward proto-writing or even a primitive weather log. Historians still argue whether the stone glyphs served any functional purpose or were purely symbolic, the way we might decorate a wall with stars to feel connected to the cosmos. But as you watch Mulugeta place a beetle gently at the center of one spiral and trace its movement with a stick, the distinction seems irrelevant. Here, the symbol is the signal. You see, he says as the beetle begins to move clockwise around the spiral. It reads the pattern. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just moving. But maybe it's moving, because the pattern is there, like how humans dance when music plays, even if no one tells them to. Some scientists have speculated that beetles may respond to low-frequency vibrations reflected by the geometry of their environment, meaning that circular or spiraled grooves could actually influence their motion. It's a fringe theory, but not implausible. You watch the beetle complete 2 perfect circles before heading directly west. That's the wind path, Mulugeta says. Means rain by midday. You nod, almost without thinking. The stones themselves seem to hum faintly, catching the wind and bouncing it back in unpredictable echoes. You press your hand to one of them, feel the ridges, the worn corners, the grooves that generations of fingers have traced. These stones are old, Mulugeta says, but the oldest ones are hidden. He leads you around the back of the slope where a flat boulder juts out like a sleeping giant. There, tucked beneath a mossy ledge, is a hidden chamber no bigger than a small hut. Inside, it's dark, dry, and lined with more carvings, this time deeper, more symmetrical. Some of the beetles here have been stylized wings, outstretched antennae drawn like lightning bolts. Above one is a series of dots in a sweeping arc. That's the sky, he says. The beetles are moving toward it. You crouch and run your fingers over the symbols. One catches your eye, a beetle curled into a ball surrounded by jagged lines. Drought, Mulugeta says. They say when the beetles hide and don't walk, the land suffers. You sit in the dim chamber surrounded by insect prophecy etched into stone and wonder, were these designs merely mnemonic devices? Or did people really believe the beetles knew something? Maybe both. You step back out into the morning light and realize the sky has changed. It's thicker now, tinged with slate. No thunder yet. But there's a mood, like a held breath. Mulugeta smiles as he watches the sky. They always walk before the rain. And indeed, a beetle scurries across one of the carved stones, just then following the spiral like a trained monk, legs clicking softly in the dust. You watch its journey without blinking, and for the first time, you understand that even silence, if carved well enough, can predict a storm. You stay near the carved stones until midday, hoping the sky will break open. It doesn't, at least not yet, but the light changes. What was once a flat, relentless sun is now diffused, tempered by thin clouds that drift like old linen sheets shaken loose from the heavens. The air is heavier too, sticky around your neck and wrists. You make your way back to the village where people are gathered under the shade of a fig tree. They're waiting for something, and from the looks on their faces, it's not good. Mulugeta joins you looking tired. The beetles lied, he says quietly. You blink. What? They all moved west yesterday. Dug deep. Walked the stones. The oracle spun 3 times. He shakes his head, but nothing. No rain. Around you, murmurs spread. Some disappointed. Some just accepting. Others whisper theories. Maybe the wind changed. Maybe the beetles were hungry. Maybe the soil was too warm. Maybe they were cursed. Or maybe they were wrong. You sit beside an elder who's chewing bitter leaves and watching the sky like he expects it to apologize. He says nothing at first, just spits to the side, then grunts. It's not their fault. You wait. The beetles see what they can. He adds, but sometimes the sky plays tricks. Or the sun hides something. Even the earth lies now and then. You nod slowly. Does this happen often, once every few years? Maybe more during eclipse seasons, or when the priests forget a step. So now you're down to ritual error. You've seen this before. Anywhere, there's a system built on observation and belief. There's also a need to explain failure. It's not just human nature. It's survival logic. You can't abandon the system entirely because it usually works. But when it doesn't, you find a reason. Historians still argue whether rituals like these survived so long because they were effective or because they were adaptable. In this case, the adaptability lies in the narrative the Beatles weren't wrong. Something interfered. A few villagers gesture toward the east. A faint shimmer on the horizon, dust rising like smoke. Mulugeta squints. There may have been a storm, but it missed us. One boy claims he saw a flash of lightning at midnight. Another insists he smelled fresh rain just before dawn. They argue gently. Their parents don't correct them. Beetles told the truth, one man says. The sky changed its mind. You wonder if it's that simple. Maybe the storm did form just far enough away that it slipped through the cracks of their observation net. Or maybe some solar fluctuation disrupted the Beetles' instincts. You remember reading that some animals get confused during solar eclipses. Birds stop singing, frogs croak at noon. One study even showed beetles burrow deeper during high geomagnetic activity. Still, as one elder says, it's hard to trust legs that don't talk. By late afternoon, the villagers are preparing a smaller ceremony, not to summon rain, but to acknowledge the mistake. Or the misreading. It's subtle quiet, a sort of spiritual footnote. No beetles this time. Just bundles of herbs burned over coals, a few murmured chants, and the passing of a jar filled with salt water. You learn the salt represents both the ocean distant and mysterious, and the sweat of human labor. Rain or no rain, the fields still need planting. You help an old woman gather beetle jars from their ceremonial stations and return them to the shaded mound at the edge of the village. Most of the beetles are still active, restless even. One spins in place, another attempts to climb the inside of its jar. They feel it too, she says. They know something changed. You ask if the beetles are punished. She looks at you like you've missed the point entirely. They're not tools, she says. They're messengers. If the letter is wrong, do you blame the bird? You walk back to the hut, with her beetle jars clicking gently in your arms. There's no anger here, just resignation. Maybe a little melancholy, but not despair. Later that night, you lie under the stars and think about all the systems you've trusted that have failed. Weather forecasts, GPS signals, career plans, relationships. Some of them looked reliable until they weren't. And just like the Beatles, you searched for meaning. Maybe it was the wrong day. Maybe the message was scrambled. Maybe the other person changed. Or the sky just didn't feel like cooperating. Maybe the wisdom isn't in getting it right, it's in staying humble when you're wrong. A single beetle crawls across your windowsill just before you drift off. You watch it climb the edge. Pause and turn in a slow circle. 1 loop, 2, 3. Then it freezes. This time you don't ask what it means. You just close your eyes. By now you've learned not to expect anything from the sky. Not too much, anyway. You wake to another dry morning, but the village feels somehow steadier, like everyone has collectively shrugged off the disappointment and picked up their tools again. The fields won't plant themselves. You follow Mulugeta into one of the larger huts near the center of the village. Inside, the light is dappled, filtering through strips of woven reed. A low table is covered in what looks like bark scrolls and pressed banana leaf parchment, all marked with strange glyphs, combinations of beetle trails, weather symbols, and geometric patterns. This, Mulugeta says, is the Rainmaker's Code. You lean in. Some of the symbols are familiar: spirals, arrows, jagged lines. But others are intricate beetles, shown mid-motion, antennae splayed in specific angles, leg positions catalogued like dance steps. Every glyph has a twin version, one in the dry season, one in the wet. They're paired like stories and their consequences. These were written over many generations, he explains. Each rain priest added a little, observed something, wrote it down, passed it on. One scroll is entirely devoted to beetle postures, arched backs, curled feet, defensive crouches, antennae drawn toward shadows or angled toward the light. Next to each posture is a glyph and a weather note. East wind low pressure, no thunder. Or storm imminent but mild. One even reads walks straight and stumbles twice hail possible. You smile. It sounds like fortune telling. But also, maybe it's just data. Each posture corresponds to a historical note, crop outcomes, water levels, even the color of sunrise that week. The scrolls read like ancient spreadsheets filtered through poetry. A particularly worn scroll near the edge of the table catches your attention. The beetle drawn on it is unique longer legs, slender body ridged wings. That's the beetle of drought, Mulugeta says. When it walks in spirals and vanishes under stone, it means no rain for 3 moons. You raise your eyebrows. Does it appear often? Only when we really don't want it to. He unrolls another chart, this one more like a calendar. Rows of symbols broken into phases. Weeks of planting. Weeks of waiting. The beetle marks appear above each date range like annotations. This was used to schedule entire seasons, Mulugeta continues. If beetles walked west in the first week of Faganya, we prepared the southern fields. If they dug before the first market, we knew the sorghum would sprout well. The code isn't rigid. There are gaps, ambiguities, places where the symbols trail off unfinished. Mulugeta explains that not all rain priests agreed on meanings. Some recorded contradictory signs. A few glyphs even have little X marks beside them, denoting failed predictions. Historians still argue whether these scrolls qualify as a full writing system. Some say, yes, they meet the structural requirements of early symbolic language. Others argue they're merely pictorial aids. The debate continues, made messier by the fact that many scrolls were lost during conquests, floods, or time itself. But here, the code is alive. Most of us can't read all of it, Mulugeta admits. But the elders remember certain sequences. And the Beetles, they still walk the same way. He shows you how the scrolls are copied by hand every 5 or 10 years. Young initiates trace the beetle paths with charcoal. They aren't allowed to guess what a symbol means until they've observed that behavior themselves. You try to imagine explaining this to a weather bureau back home. We base our forecasts on beetle posture rainfall archives and which scroll smells like crushed mint today. You'd be laughed out of the room. And yet this system is old, functional, deeply observed. Mulugeta picks up a small wooden tablet etched with a spiral and 2 triangles. This symbol, he says, only appears once every 10 or 12 years. When it does, storms come so suddenly that we barely have time to bring in the grain. He places the tablet back gently. We don't always understand what the Beetles are doing, he adds, but they do it consistently. You think of your favorite scientific theories, how even the best ones are only models, versions of reality that haven't broken yet. Meteorology works the same way. Radars, pressure charts, historical trends. Fancy Beetles, you think. Glorified scarabs made of silicon and math. Still, you feel something stirring in your chest, an admiration not just for the Beetles, but for the patience it took to make this code. To watch every day for centuries. To record what happened, not just what was hoped for. There's a phrase inked in the corner of one scroll translated roughly as rain comes when the earth listens to the sky. But we must first listen to the earth. You ask Mulugeta if the scrolls are ever wrong. He shrugs. Of course. But they remember better than we do. Before you leave the hut, he hands you a scrap of bark parchment. A single glyph burned into its center, a beetle walking west, antenna arched with a small crescent above. Carry this, he says. It means change is coming, but it waits for you to notice. You pocket it slowly. Outside, the wind brushes past warm again. The Beetles aren't talking today. But maybe they're listening. The sun hangs low as the day leans toward dusk, and the wind carries with it the familiar taste of dust and dry leaves. A subtle charge hums beneath your feet. Not thunder, not yet, but a prickling sense that something is shifting. You wander back through the narrow paths between huts until the air grows gritty and the light dulls in a strange yellowish haze. Then you hear it. A low murmur from the edge of the village. You turn toward it and see the first strands of sand swirling near the horizon, pulled into a high spiral that dances like smoke. A storm, but not the one you hoped for. Habub, Mulugeta says grimly, stepping beside you. A bad one. A wall of sand rises in the distance like a moving cliff. Not fast, not violent yet, but steady, certain looming. And it's coming this way. The villagers begin to move swiftly. Doors are latched, jars are covered, bundles are brought in from the drying racks. No panic. Just practiced urgency. This isn't their first dust storm. You and Mulugeta duck into one of the storage huts where the walls are packed with woven baskets of grain. The air inside is cooler, denser, and laced with the scent of sorghum and clay. You sit against the wall and feel the pressure drop. Outside, the first blast of sand rattles against the roof like dry rain. You glance toward a jar near the door. A beetle scurries along its rim legs, frantic. They knew, Mulugeta says almost to himself. They always know, before we do. You remember that yesterday several beetles had moved in strange, hesitant arcs, patterns that didn't fit any of the scrolls. One had even dug in the wrong direction. You thought it was a mistake. Now you're not so sure. There's an old belief in the village, one rarely voiced out loud, that the beetles speak not just to the soil or the sky, but to each other. Through vibrations, perhaps. Through scent trails. Through signals too small for human senses. One elder swears that beetles will flee the village before a sandstorm, climbing trees or hiding under rocks. Another insists that they hum yes hum when the wind shifts dangerously. Historians remain skeptical. Some consider it folklore wrapped in coincidence. Others point to animal behavior studies showing that insects can indeed detect low-frequency rumbling changes in static charge and even infrared heat from approaching events. But nobody outside the village talks about the jar. You ask Mulugeta what it is. He gestures for silence, then moves closer, tapping the side gently. Inside is a large clay bowl with a beetle floating, yes, floating on a disc of dry wood. Around the base of the jar, holes have been drilled in a precise pattern like a flute. As the wind flows through, the jar hums. Not a whistle, not a shriek, just a gentle, eerie tone that seems to vibrate in your teeth. The jar sings when the storm is near. He says, you kneel, peering inside. The beetle isn't panicking. It's rocking gently with the vibration legs, tucked antennae raised, like it's tuning into the frequency of the dust. It's not magic. It's physics. Or close enough. The villagers claim that each jar hums differently. The tone changes with pressure and temperature, and some believe the beetles respond to specific pitches. One boy swears he saw a beetle mimic the rhythm of the jar with its feet once. No one believes him. And yet, here you are. Mulugeta points to a pattern on the jar's neck, a series of dots and triangles. This one was made 2 generations ago. Only sings during sandstorms. Not for wind, not for rain, just for this, he adds. Some say the jars were tuned using beetles themselves, adjusting the holes until the insects reacted. Scientists today might call it nonsense. They'd test wind flow. They'd model acoustics, but they wouldn't sit beside the jar for an hour watching how the beetle reacts when the tone shifts by a single note. Outside, the storm finally hits. A solid wall of fine sand pours over the village, coating everything in a veil of red and brown. You hear cloth flapping, wood creaking, distant shouting muted by the weight of the storm. Inside the hut, the jar keeps humming. The beetle lifts its front legs. It spins once, digs briefly on the disc, then stills. Mulugeta watches with the eyes of someone watching prophecy unfold. You see, he says the beetles did not lie. They simply spoke in a language we were too busy to understand. You stay there long after the worst of the storm has passed, listening to the fading hum, watching the dust settle into every crevice. When you finally step outside, the world is covered in a thin coat of red. The beetle trails from earlier are gone. The children's dance is erased. Even the carved stones bear a softer shape now. But the jar still sings, and the beetle still listens. When the wind finally dies down and the world exhales, the village emerges like a half-buried relic, colors dulled beneath a layer of fine red dust. Everything is softer now, muted. The children's footsteps leave deep prints in the sand as they shuffle out to sweep porches and uncover cooking fires. You pass one of the beetle jars you saw days earlier. It's now almost completely buried, only the lid protruding like the tip of a fossil. Mulugeta lifts it free and opens it slowly. The beetle inside is still alive, clinging to the side like it rode out the storm with its own quiet patience. The beetles know how to wait, he says, brushing the rim clean. Sometimes that's the only thing to do. Later that day, you're invited into one of the older huts, a round structure made of sun-baked mud and thatched roof. Inside, the walls are covered with concentric circles painted in ochre and charcoal. At first glance, they look like decorations, simple sunbursts or spirals. But then you see it again, the unmistakable shape of beetles, lined up in rows, spaced in patterns, dancing across the walls in paint as they do across the dirt in life. This is the house of the clay spirits, Mulugeta explains. You blink. What kind of spirits? He smiles. The ones that live in the jars. Ah, of course. He walks to the center of the room where 7 jars are arranged in a semicircle, each a little different. Some squat and fat, others tall and thin, all smooth and reddish-brown. Crude symbols are etched into their sides, spirals, arrows, circles split by lines. You kneel beside one and listen. Faint echoes swirl inside like the air hasn't quite settled. These are the storm jars, he says, gesturing around the room. They hum when the wind changes. Some hum low like thunder. Others high like insects buzzing. You step closer to one and place your hand near its opening. There's a definite vibration, subtle, yes, but real. A soft thrumming like the final pluck of a harp string. The villagers believe the jars sing only when the weather speaks, and they believe the beetles hear them. Each jar is paired with a set of patterns drawn into the dirt around its base, circular runways, etched with a stick smoothed with fingers. You watch as a boy places a beetle at the edge of one such pattern. It stands still for a moment, antennae twitching, then scuttles along the outer ring, hesitates, and makes a jagged cut inward. The adults murmur. That's the third trail, someone says. Rain with crosswind. You raise your eyebrows. They still read them right here in the jars. Yes, Mulugeta nods. Especially after dust storms, the beetles are more sensitive then. Their legs feel the change in the air. You crouch beside one of the larger jars and trace the symbols with your fingertip. The clay is cool despite the heat. There's a small notch near the base, and when the wind hits it just right, the jar whistles, faintly. A soft sigh, barely audible. In ancient times, you're told these jars were used not only as beetle houses, but as instruments. Wind-powered barometers. When grouped together, their notes harmonized. A certain chord meant rising pressure. Another meant change. The elders would walk among them at dawn, listening, heads tilted like musicians tuning an orchestra. Historians still argue whether these jars were intentionally tuned, or if the sounds were incidental, accidents of shape and material. Some dismiss the tonal theory entirely. Others believe the jars were designed with such precision that even a small crack could throw off their weather readings. Here, they don't argue. They just listen. Mulugeta guides you to the largest jar placed in the center of the circle. It's older than the others' rim-chipped patterns worn to near invisibility. A rope of incense still curls around its neck. He lifts the lid and places a single beetle inside. The beetle doesn't move at first. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it charges clockwise, then halts and digs at the southern rim. The villagers nod slowly. One elder leans in. This jar sings for coming storms. Always has. You look up. The sky outside is pale, but clouds are gathering. A thin line of darker blue curls along the horizon. And the smell, that soft, damp smell, is back again. Stronger now. Mulugeta turns to you. We use the jars for wind. But the beetles, they tell us the mood of the wind. You nod. You're starting to believe in moods you can't name. That night, as the wind thickens and the trees whisper like they're remembering something, you lie inside the clay hut and listen. The jars hum gently. Not all of them. Just one or two. A low note. A pause. Then another. Almost like call and response. And beneath it, movement. Tiny feet on packed dirt. A beetle perhaps making one final circuit before sleep. Or a warning. Or a welcome. You close your eyes to the music of clay and legs, and wind, and dream of jars that never stop singing even when the storm has passed. You're roused in the middle of the night, not by thunder or wind, but by a soft knocking on the side of the hut. A rhythmic tapping, deliberate and slow. You sit up disoriented, and Mulugeta's voice drifts through the door. They're dreaming, he says. You open the door to find him holding a small oil lamp and a bundle of reed mats. He nods toward the edge of the village where a half-circle of huts rests near the trees. The air is cool now, the kind of cool that makes your breath barely visible. The scent of petrichor clings like fog, heavy and sweet. Tonight, we sleep with the beetles. You blink. With them, he smiles. Among them. You follow him to a small circular structure, low walls, no door, open ceiling. Inside, it's lined with beetle jars, but instead of being sealed or ritualistic, these are open, airy, resting in rows like soft musical notes. You count at least 24 beetles moving gently in shallow bowls of dust and flower petals. The room hums quiet but constant. Wings flutter. Legs click. Antennae sweep slowly in half-dream gestures. A few other villagers join laying mats in a crescent shape. No one speaks loudly. They move with the hush of a shared secret. Mulugeta lays his mat beside yours and says, "The oldest rain priests used to sleep in the beetle house the night before a storm. They believed the beetles would speak to them in dreams." You smile, unsure whether to laugh or nod solemnly. So you do both. As you settle onto the mat head resting on a folded cloth, your eyes adjust to the darkness. Above the stars are thin and trembling. One jar hums faintly with the breeze. The beetles are more active now, twitching, crawling, some even flipping themselves over and writing again. You close your eyes. At first, there's nothing. Just the ordinary fade into sleep. Then, something begins to shift. A sound. A feeling. A rhythm like feet on dry earth, like clicking on stone, like water dripping from the sky and vanishing before it lands. In your dream, you're walking through a wide field of cracked mud. The sky above you churns slowly. And everywhere beetles. Not in swarms. Just scattered, moving in purposeful lines. Each one following a trail that vanishes behind them. You bend to watch one more closely. It's carving a spiral into the ground, its legs sketching each turn like a compass needle. Then another beetle stops at your feet and turns 3 circles. Then digs. You look up. The clouds part just slightly, and a single drop of rain falls on your forehead. You wake with a start. The stars are still above, but the sky is darker now, lower, closer. Mulugeta sits up beside you. You heard it. You hesitate. I dreamed of beetles digging. He nods, like this is the most ordinary confession in the world. They always come in dreams, the night before the first rain. The others stir too, murmuring their dreams to one another. Someone says their beetle flew. Another says theirs turned to salt. A woman whispers that her beetle walked backward into the fire, and the fire became mist. No one laughs. Every dream is recorded. Mulugeta notes them quietly in a soot-smeared journal. He explains that dream beetles are different from waking ones. They speak more freely, without ritual. And they appear only when the conditions are just right, not just in the sky, but in the dreamer. Calm mind, clean heart, listening ears. Some scientists, of course, scoff at this practice. Lucid dreaming tied to weather prediction, fringe nonsense, they say. And yet, isn't dream work just another form of memory pattern recognition filtered through sleep? Historians still debate the meaning of beetle dreams in ancient texts. Are they metaphor, myth, or part of a broader sleep-based observational tradition that's now lost? Here, they aren't lost. They're nightly visitors. One elder half asleep mumbles. Mine turned into rain and climbed into my ear. No one questions her. They simply mark it down. As morning edges closer, the jars begin to vibrate again. Not loud. Just enough to stir the smallest hairs on your arm. The beetles grow quiet, their legs still, their antennae rest, and then, almost imperceptibly, the first drop falls. Not dramatic, not thunderous, just a soft tap on the thatch roof. Then another, and another. Outside, the earth begins to drink. Inside, no one speaks. They simply smile, eyes still half closed, listening to the dream turning into weather. You sit up fully and watch the rain bead on the rim of a beetle jar slide down its curved neck and disappear into the earth. Mulugeta breathes deeply. They told us. We just had to sleep long enough to hear it. Morning comes gray and quiet, wrapped in the kind of soft drizzle that doesn't demand attention, only patience. The soil is darker now, richer, breathing deeply as if relieved from weeks of holding its breath. Puddles form in the village paths like shallow mirrors, and tiny rivulets snake between the huts, stitching the land back together. You walk slowly, your sandals squelching in the mud, every step, a gentle splash. The beetle jars glisten with a fine sheen of moisture, their etched glyphs, darker now, more pronounced. It's as if the rain has woken everything, not just the earth, but memory. Children are already outside splashing in the puddles, hands outstretched, mouths open to catch the sky. A few mimic beetle movements again, crawling through the mud with exaggerated antennae arms, laughing as they tumble into the wetness. One girl lies flat on her back in a pool of rain, declaring herself a blessed beetle queen. No one argues. You find Mulugeta near the fields where villagers have begun the first round of digging. The soil turns easily beneath their tools, damp but not soggy, perfect for planting. He watches with his arms crossed, lips pressed in a rare smile. They were right, he says. You don't need to ask who. Near the edge of the field, small flags have been planted in the ground, each bearing a beetle symbol. You recognize them from the Rainmaker's Code, the three-circle walker, the Western Spiral, the Dream Digger. Each flag marks a plot where the Beetles made predictions. It's part homage, part data collection. Mulugeta explains that they'll monitor these plots closely, watching which ones thrive, which struggle. Every harvest feeds back into the scrolls, the jars, the dream journals. This is how we learn, he says. One beetle, one plot, one season at a time. It's a different kind of science, slow, patient, deeply localized. And yet, you realize it has all the hallmarks of rigor. Observation, hypothesis, pattern, revision. And unlike your world of remote sensing and climate models, this system lives in the hands and memories of the people themselves. You help dig for a while, your hands quickly caked in warm, sticky mud. It's strangely satisfying, like sculpting something old and important. With every shovelful, the air seems fresher. The sky still drips occasionally, but the clouds are gentler now, no longer heavy with threat. Later, as the work slows and midday heat begins to creep back in, you're invited to share a meal. A broad leaf is placed in your hands, holding a mash of roasted roots and steamed greens. You sit in a circle with the others under a thatched awning, while the drizzle patters on the roof like soft applause. Someone asks about your dream. You share it, the beetles in the cracked mud, the single drop on your forehead, and the villagers nod as if you've passed an unspoken test. One of the old dreams, an elder says. A clean one. You ask what that means. He shrugs. Some dreams are tangled. Yours was clear. Across from you, a woman begins singing low and rhythmic. The tune sounds like a lullaby, but the words are different. They speak of beetles rolling clouds instead of dung of legs drawing rivers in the sand of antennae tuning the wind. You join in softly, at first matching the rhythm even if the meaning escapes you. Then, Mulugeta brings out a small bowl filled with rainwater, and sets it on a flat stone. He places a beetle beside it. It circles once, then climbs the stone, and dips its front legs into the water. There, he whispers, it blesses the first drink. You blink. You believe it knows what it's doing. He tilts his head. I believe it does what it always does. We're the ones trying to understand it. Historians still argue whether these beetle blessing rituals were invented later, romantic flourishes added to older agricultural systems, or if they're remnants of a much older animistic belief system. One that saw the natural world not as inert, but as constantly whispering. You sit in silence and watch the beetle move. Not erratic, not aimless, just steady. It stops at the edge of the bowl and rests its body, casting a long shadow in the late morning light. The villagers drink. So do you. It tastes like earth, like something remembered. That evening, just before the light fades, the beetles come out in force. Dozens of them scuttling across the wet earth, weaving trails like invisible ink. The children chase them gently, the elders observe, and someone begins humming the Beetle song again. You walk barefoot across the softened ground, following the patterns, tracing loops with your toes. The mud squishes satisfyingly. The beetles seem unbothered by your presence, as if you're just one more creature deciphering the sky. Mulugeta walks beside you. Do you know what the beetle never does? He asks. You shake your head. It never asks the sky why it didn't rain yesterday. You smile. It just keeps walking. He nods. Exactly. And as the last rays of sunlight gild the wet leaves and the first frogs begin their song, you feel finally fully like part of the system. Not just an observer, a listener, a walker, a translator of trails. The next day dawns soaked in gold and birdsong. Water drips from the thatch rooftops in slow rhythmic intervals, like the earth exhaling after a long-held breath. The fields glisten under the rising sun. Beetle trails from last night etch temporary hieroglyphs across the wet dust already beginning to fade under the footsteps of early risers. You stretch your arms and notice the aches in your shoulders from yesterday's digging. They feel earned. Today, Mulugeta says you'll meet the ones who listen below. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. The farmers who believe beetles hear storms before they form. Underground. It sounds like a proverb, but he means it literally. You follow him beyond the fields, past the old carved stones, and the jars to the edge of a low plateau, where the wind grows quiet and the soil darkens. Here, Long trenches have been dug into the earth not for planting, but for observation. Tiny microphones sit inside hollowed gourds placed near beetle burrows. Taut cords run to shaded shelters where elders sit listening through crude ear horns and stone amplifiers. You watch as one man nods slowly, eyes closed, then whispers, "North." 2 days. You look at Mulugeta confused. They hear tremors, he explains. Shifts in the deep roots. Pressure changes. Some say beetles can hear the sound of water moving under rock. It's not as outlandish as it seems. Modern science has recorded evidence of insects responding to seismic vibrations. Some termites abandon nests seconds before earthquakes. Ants cluster strangely when pressure changes. And beetles, they've been shown to respond to deep, low-frequency sound far below what we can hear. You crouch beside one of the trenches and listen. Nothing. Just silence, soft and endless. Mulugeta hands you a gourd ear horn. Try. You press it to your ear, the gourd fitting snug. At first, nothing. Then, a faint clicking. A pause. A scrape. Not random. Not chaos. Just the sound of something. Alive. Something with legs. Moving. Is that the beetle? He nods. One of them. That one only digs after midnight when the soil is warm. How do you know? He shrugs. He's done it 5 years in a row. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's oddly beautiful. This strange intimacy. A beetle's private habits memorized like bedtime stories. One of the listeners nearby beckons you. He's sketched something in the dirt, a simple drawing. A beetle, mid-dig, curved lines beneath it, wavy lines above. Next to it, he's drawn a series of notches 5, spaced apart. 5 tremors, Mulugeta translates. Small ones, low and south. The listeners don't record with instruments. They draw what they feel. The beetle's rhythm. Its speed. The pauses between scrapes. It's all coded into a visual diary in the sand, which is later copied onto scrolls. Sometimes the beetles dig slower when the ground is still, Mulugeta adds. Sometimes they freeze when it rumbles. That's when we wait. A small child runs up with a folded leaf. Inside is a curled up beetle, legs twitching. She sets it gently near a burrow, and everyone watches as it rights itself and scuttles into the dark with a purposeful grace. You ask if they ever interfere. No, Mulugeta says. They're guides, not tools. You sit for hours letting the rhythm of the underground fill your ears through the gourd. You can't interpret it. Not yet. But it feels like something is down there, whispering in footfalls. One elder leans close and mutters, "The rain speaks through the bones of the earth." And the beetles have their ears on the spine. It's more poetic than scientific, but also more precise. Historians still argue whether such practices were practical knowledge or metaphor dressed as ritual. There's no hard evidence that ancient Ethiopians tuned into seismic waves through beetles. But there are records of trenches dug solely to observe insects, and scrolls that pair beetle behavior with pre-storm ground shifts. You watch a man sketch a spiral into the sand beside a beetle burrow. He's mapping last night's tremor, Mulugeta whispers. 3 pauses. Then a long dig. You glance toward the horizon. It's pale, cloudless, but heavy with the memory of rain. The beetles dig again. Not wildly. Not frantically. Just a slow rhythmic push. Scrape. Rest. Scrape. A language you're beginning to hear not with your ears but with your bones. Later that night, as you lie in your mat again, the ground beneath you feels different. Not shaking, not stirring. Just alive. Warm. Breathing. You close your eyes and imagine yourself small underground antennae-high legs tuned to the frequency of soil and root and water. Above, the jars rest in silence. Below, the beetles speak in dirt. And you, in the middle, start to listen in a whole new way. You rise, before the sun, drawn not by sound, but by stillness, a silence so complete, it feels like it's holding its breath. The sky is a sheet of slate, neither dark nor light. You slip outside barefoot. The earth cool under your soles and follow the curve of the path past the beetle jars, past the trench listeners toward a place few seem to go without invitation. The site is older than the others. You can feel it in the stones, smooth worn thin, by generations of feet and wind. And there, etched into a tall standing slab, is a script unlike the others. Glyphs. Beetles. Yes, but different now. Stylized. Encircled by laurel leaves. Framed in suns. Their legs are angled deliberate, and their antennae resemble spears, horns, crowns. This is Aksumiti Mulugeta says quietly behind you. You glance at him. He looks reverent, cautious. They were kings, emperors, and even they asked the beetles before they marched. He gestures to the base of the stone, where a faint outline of a beetle is carved beneath royal script. It's less detailed than the glyphs in the rain scrolls, but unmistakable. The empire of Aksum, he explains, had stone priests and sky priests. But the earth priests, they listened here. You trace a finger along one of the lines, surprised by the clarity. The beetle is centered beneath 3 crescent moons and what appears to be a map rivers, flowing in symmetry around mountains. It was believed, Mulugeta continues, that if a beetle crossed your warpath before the rains, the campaign would fail. You raise an eyebrow. Did they cancel battles over that? Once, at least. Maybe more. He shrugs. They would never write it down. Emperors don't like to admit they listen to bugs. He walks you to a smaller stone nearby, flatter cracked clean down the middle. But this one did. He says, this was a general's prayer stone. See the writing? You do. It's crude, etched deep, less decorative. A mix of official script and what Mulugeta tells you is an early weather glyph. The translation is rough. The beetle walked backward. I turned home. It's simple, clear, and humbling. Historians still argue whether Aksumite rulers truly incorporated beetle augury into their decisions, or whether these were isolated cases, regional rituals mistaken for state policy. But a few undeniable connections remain. In burial chambers, beetle symbols appear alongside shields. Some ancient coins depict scarabs beneath wheat stalks. And one crumbling parchment recovered from a northern cave includes the curious line, "Let not the harvest, nor the horn rise, before the beetle's mark." You wander the site, slowly absorbing the echoes in the stone. Why beetles, you ask? Mulugeta smiles. Because they carry the earth on their backs. They dig, they roll, they bury, they reveal. They're quiet, patient, hard to fool. And they've been here longer than any king. He steps closer to the largest stone and touches it lightly with his palm. The emperor could not watch the sky all day, but the beetles could. You sit beneath the stones as the sun finally rises, casting golden light through the ancient carvings. One shaft of sunlight lands squarely on a small patch of dirt just ahead of you, and right on cue, a beetle emerges. You and Mulugeta both freeze, not from fear, but from recognition. It's the same species you've seen many times now, wide-bodied, dark-shelled calm. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't circle. It walks. Straight, west. Mulugeta nods slowly. The emperor would have marched. You watch it until it disappears behind a tuft of grass. As you stand, Mulugeta says, some say the beetles are not predicting anything. They're remembering, carrying knowledge that the ground has forgotten. It sounds like a parable, or a lullaby, or the kind of wisdom that only reveals itself when you've spent enough time watching things smaller than you. You leave the stone site quietly. No ceremony, just footsteps in the dew-soaked grass. But something follows you, not a thought, not quite a feeling, a presence. Like the beetles are walking alongside you now, their trails not in the dirt, but in your head, mapping things with legs instead of ink. And behind you, the wind brushes past the stones, low and whispering. The next day is warm and silver bright, the kind of light that feels like it's pressing gently on your skin instead of just illuminating it. The rains have passed, but the scent of wet bark and moss lingers deep in the folds of the village paths. You walk toward the small shrine near the grain stores where Mulugeta has promised to show you something rare. Inside the dim hut, nestled among woven baskets of seed and sealed clay pots, sits a flat square board carved from ebony wood. It's old, dark, smooth as bone, and covered in fine lines too detailed for farming, too consistent for art. At its center is a raised circle with a polished beetle embedded under clear resin wings spread wide. Mulugeta lowers his voice. This is the royal seal. You look closer. The beetle shimmers faintly, an iridescent green-blue sheen beneath the resin. Its preserved, perfectly frozen mid-step, antennae-poised legs caught in eternal movement. It was used by the rain priests who served under the emperor, Mulugeta says, to stamp the clay tablets that confirmed a forecast. Once the beetles were read, the priest would press this onto wax or wet parchment. You run your fingers along the edge of the board. The seal itself is small, not more than a thumbprint in size. Around it are beetle trail patterns radiating outward. Tight spirals, hooked turns, sharp jags etched with painstaking care. They're not decorative. They're diagnostic. Each trail shape corresponds to an old term. One is labeled mudsinger, another skybender. One particularly complex spiral is marked diviner of twins, which Mulugeta explains refers to a rare rainfall pattern that produces two symmetrical storms, a twin rain they call it. You ask how old the seal is. He shrugs. No one knows. Some say it came from the Red Sea coast. Others say it was a gift from the Beetles themselves. You're not sure which answer makes more sense. Outside children run past, laughing. One carries a jar in each hand, Beetle's inside legs tapping the clay like castanets. They don't know the seal, Mulugeta says. Not yet. We keep it until the signs return. What signs? He taps one of the trail etchings, the one marked ash above breath. A pattern the Beetles only made once. During the Great Famine long ago. 3 months of digging with no spirals. Only this jagged line. You study it. It zigzags without rhythm, sharp and impatient. He continues. When this pattern was stamped on the scroll, it meant to burn the fields and move north. You exhale slowly. Did they listen most to Diddy says? The ones who didn't. He lets the sentence trail off. You understand. Historians who've studied the royal seal often downplay its function, calling it ceremonial, symbolic, ornamental. But a few fringe theorists believe the embedded beetle might have had real ritual value. One archaeologist even claimed the resin was made from a mixture of tree sap and volcanic ash, creating a perfectly airtight seal that preserved the beetle's life signature, or Inkarat, a concept lost in translation, but roughly meaning echo spirit. You don't ask Mulugeta if he believes that. Instead, he opens a small wooden drawer beneath the board and pulls out a scroll. It's cracked with age, the edges fraying like dried petals. Carefully, he unrolls it across the table. Stamped 5 times near the top is the beetle seal. 5 spirals, each one a little different, but unmistakable. This, he says, was the last time all the signs agreed. Rain came for 7 days. The river breached. Crops were rich. They say even the granaries wept from fullness. You smile. And the Beetles got credit. He grins. Of course. The emperor himself sent a necklace of carved beetles to the rain priest. You imagine it now, a king humbled by insects. Not by swords, not by gods, but by creatures smaller than a coin. The idea sticks with you. That evening, Mulugeta offers you a replica of the seal carved in soft soapstone. Not for ceremony, he says, just for memory. You press it into a square of damp clay. It leaves a perfect imprint. A beetle mid-step, legs open, antennae high. You let the clay harden on your windowsill that night under a sky filled with stars and stories, and the echoes of tiny feet on ancient scrolls. Morning comes with laughter. Not the nervous kind that creeps up after silence, but the full-bodied kind, warm and unashamed like rain, finally remembering how to fall. You follow the sound through the village past the beetle trenches and the stone glyphs, until you reach a group of farmers surrounding a visitor. He's dressed differently. Not a villager. His tunic bears the bright stitching of a northern merchant, and he's accompanied by a donkey loaded down with baskets and ceramic jars. What's going on? You ask Mulugeta, who joins you with a slight shake of the head. They've come to borrow the weather, he says, only half joking. Apparently word has spread. A neighboring village days away is locked in drought. Their jars have stayed silent. Their beetles haven't walked in weeks. And so as tradition allows, they've come here to trade, to plead, maybe to learn. Or maybe Mulugeta adds to find a beetle lucky enough to bring back the rain. Can you do that? You ask. Just relocate a beetle. He laughs. Beetles go where they please. But sometimes they follow grain. Indeed, the merchant unpacks a satchel filled with dry goods, millet-dried figs, a lump of honeycomb, bartering gifts. In return, he asks only for guidance, and if permitted, a single jar with a beetle inside. Not any beetle, though. One that has recently spun 3 spirals and dug before sunset. You glance around, and sure enough, a few villagers nod. That behavior happened 3 days ago. The chosen beetle is retrieved, gently placed in a small travel jar with fresh earth herbs and a single smooth stone to keep it grounded during the journey. The merchant bows low, not just to the jar, but to the people, to the air, to the dirt beneath his feet. Mulugeta speaks with him briefly in a dialect you don't understand, then turns to you. He wants to bring the beetle back after the rains return. Says he'll build a shrine. Maybe name a son after it. You blink. He's serious. Oh yes, Mulugeta says. He's from the river folk. They believe beetles carry sky fragments on their backs. It sounds poetic, until you realize he's not being metaphorical. One of the oldest beliefs here is that beetles aren't just messengers, but carriers. They gather fragments of wind and light and pressure. They roll them like dung balls into the places that need them, not just physically, but energetically, as if the atmosphere itself can be nudged into motion by 6 tiny legs and stubborn optimism. Historians often ignore these stories in favor of agriculture timelines and trade routes. But you've seen now how knowledge and belief here aren't separate, they're intertwined like roots under the soil. Later you sit with Mulugeta and the elders as they document the exchange. It must be recorded date season pattern of the beetle's behavior village of origin offering given. A special note is made if the rain returns to the borrower's land. If it does, the beetle is honored. If it doesn't, it is buried near the traveling jars in silence. There was a time, one elder says, when beetle exchanges were common. Entire festivals formed around them. People would come from the highlands, trade stories, offer music in return for a reading. Or for a single trail, another ads. Even a false one was worth the journey. At least you learned how not to listen. They laugh again, not cruelly fondly, as if they've all been tricked by bugs at some point in their lives. You ask, what happens if the beetle dies in transit? Mulugeta answers softly, then it becomes a part of the soil it never knew. And maybe the rain finds it anyway. It's hard not to feel a strange pull at that idea. A tiny funeral, a burial with hope, instead of mourning. The merchant ties the jar to his donkey's saddle with strips of fabric embroidered with beetle shapes. You watch them disappear down the dusty path, the wind tugging gently at his coat. He's lucky, Mulugeta says. That beetle likes to travel. You spend the rest of the afternoon helping to draw the beetle's last few trails from memory, copying them onto parchment as reference. They'll be kept in the rain scroll library marked Loaned to River Village New Moon Season. One child draws a little crown on the beetle's back, just a joke. But the elders allow it. By evening you realize something you hadn't before. The beetles here are not just watched. They are trusted, entrusted, not with power, but with presence, with participating in the world, and maybe with giving it back when it's taken too much. As the sky darkens and stars begin their silent climb, Mulugeta hands you a seed. Plant it tomorrow, he says. Where the beetle walked. You nod. Do you think it'll grow? He smiles. If the beetle whispered to the earth, then the earth remembers. You wake to the sound of whispers not from people, but from the leaves. They rustle like gossiping elders, their soft friction passing rumors from tree to tree. There's a tension in the air like something's missing, or has been taken. You walk out to the main clearing expecting to find Mulugeta by the beetle jars, but instead you find silence. No children, no villagers, no beetles, just the absence of motion. Then from the far side of the village, a woman runs barefoot across the mud-slick path, her eyes wide, her voice breathless. They've taken it, she says. You follow the growing murmurs past the fields, past the clay huts, until you reach the northern boundary of the village, where the trees thicken and the beetle stones sit in a semicircle of scrub and wild grass. The central jar is broken, shattered. Its lid lies cracked in two. Bits of fresh herbs are scattered across the ground. But the beetle, the oracle beetle, is gone. No one speaks for a long moment. Then the speculation begins. Some say it wandered off, unlikely. Some say it died and was taken by scavengers, implausible. But most settle on what they've already begun to whisper: it was stolen. By a neighboring tribe, perhaps. One that had heard of the oracle beetle's accurate prediction. One that had faced drought, jealousy, desperation. And, in the shadows of that need, crept in under the veil of wind and night to take the one thing they could not summon themselves. A young boy kicks at the edge of the broken jar, then kneels and picks up a small object. It's a strip of cloth, dyed blue and marked with a spiral not used in this village. Mulugeta holds it up and stares for a long time. Riverfolk, he says, but not our friend. These are others, desperate ones. You ask what happens now? We must retrieve it. An elder replies. Or the rain will sour. You blink. You mean stop. No, the elder says. I mean it will fall in the wrong places. Wrong times. It will punish instead of nourish. You try to wrap your head around it. Can one beetle's absence shift the balance? You remind yourself this is not about the beetle. This is about what it represents. A lineage, a memory, a dialogue between ground and sky. Mulugeta places a flat stone over the broken jar's former pedestal. We will honor it, he says, until it returns or until we choose another. But you notice he doesn't draw a new trail. He doesn't release another beetle. Not yet. The next few days are filled with preparation. A delegation will travel to the suspected village, not to accuse, but to inquire, to explain the beetle's role, to ask for its return. Peacefully, respectfully. You ask if that's ever worked before. Once Mulugeta says, but it took the promise of 3 rain jars and a half-season's worth of millet. You want to be skeptical, but part of you, most of you by now understands. When the world dries out, you'll trade anything for rain, even dignity. There's an old story Mulugeta tells you that night by the fire, of a time many seasons ago when 2 tribes nearly went to war over a single beetle. A gold-leg walker so rare that its trails glowed in moonlight. One village claimed it brought early floods. The other said it kept the rivers tame. In the end, they shared custody 3 months apiece. But the beetle died before the first trade, and the rains didn't come for 2 years. Coincidence, you ask? Of course, he says with a smile. But no one forgets. You realize the oracle beetle was never just an insect. It was a treaty, a truth, a witness. To lose it is to lose a balance. That night the village performs a quiet rite. No chants, no fire. Just silence broken only by the soft pressing of palms to soil. One by one the villagers touch the dirt where the beetle once walked. A child places a leaf. Another places a grain. Mulugeta places a line of petals. You place a stone. When the wind shifts, it carries with it the feeling of something unfinished. Like a word interrupted, a trail smudged before it was read. You ask Mulugeta what will happen if the beetle isn't returned. He's quiet for a long time. Then we wait. He says finally, we watch the others. We listen harder. And perhaps in time a new beetle will come. Not as replacement, but as continuation. Because the trail is never broken, he says only paused. The oracle beetle is gone, but life in its stubborn rhythm continues. The fields must still be tilled. The jars still tended. Beetles still walk. Yet something has shifted, a quiet unease that ripples beneath each routine. You sense it in the way the elders lean in closer when observing a new beetle's trail. In how Mulugeta no longer smiles when watching the dream jar hum. In how the children speak softer, their games of mimicry replaced by careful tracing of spirals in the dust. It's not mourning exactly. It's something older. Doubt. You sit beside Mulugeta as he rubs ash into the base of a new observation mat, refreshing the symbols. Each one is more deliberate now, etched with a precision you hadn't seen before. The stakes are different. Will we choose another oracle, you ask quietly? He doesn't look up. We do not choose. The beetle chooses us. You nod, not quite understanding, but no longer needing to. The next morning, before the mist burns off, a stranger arrives. Wrapped in ochre cloth, face lined with dust and fatigue. His feet are cracked from walking, and in his hands cupped gently like water rests a beetle. Not the oracle, but close. Its shell glints green in the early light. Its antennae move slowly as if uncertain of the new air. The man kneels before the village council and places the beetle inside a shallow jar filled with damp soil. I found it walking the southern river bend, he says. 3 spirals. Then stillness. He bows. If it is nothing, I will take it back. No one speaks at first. Then one elder steps forward and peers into the jar. The beetle is still. Watching, perhaps. Or waiting. It bears the mark, she says. The mark they show you later beneath its hind leg is a faint discoloration like a birthmark shaped not unlike the broken oracle's own trail. A crescent beside a hook. It's not proof, but it's a suggestion. Still, there's hesitation. The council agrees to test it, and so begins the rite of return. You watch as they place the beetle onto the ceremonial mat under the mid-morning sun. A hush falls. Dust hangs in the light like a veil. The beetle does not move. Minutes pass. Finally a step, then another, then 3 spirals wide, deliberate, evenly spaced. And then it digs. The villagers let out a collective breath they didn't know they were holding. You expect cheers? Relief. But what follows is silence. A weighty, reverent stillness. Later, Mulugeta explains, if it walks the same trail as the one before, it carries more than prediction. It carries memory. You ask if this beetle can become the new oracle. He nods. If it chooses to stay. For 3 nights they leave its jar uncovered. Beetles can leave if they wish. Many do. But this one remains. It digs. It hums when the jars hum. It spirals at dawn. By the 4th day, the villagers begin referring to it not as a beetle, but the beetle. Still not everyone agrees. One elder raises a hand at the council and speaks slowly. We do not know what happened to the last one. We cannot build trust on replacement. Another responds, it is not replacement. It is return. You realize then how fragile belief can be balanced between grief and renewal. The oracle, Beetle, was more than a tool. It was a presence, and presences once lost don't return easily. Historians still argue whether such oracles were truly singular or whether each village rotated its chosen beetle with quiet regularity. Some suggest the myth of one perfect insect was simply narrative convenience, a way to make cycles feel like continuity. But here, cycles are continuity. And when the new beetle spirals again that evening, no one questions it aloud. Instead, the rain jars are dusted, the observation mats realigned. The children draw new trails with their feet in the dirt, and the broken jar that once held the vanished oracle is buried beneath the beetle stones sealed with wax marked with petals. It becomes a tomb, a monument. And above it, the villagers press a new glyph into clay. A spiral, interrupted, then continued. The rainy season settles in slowly like a guest who's finally accepted the invitation. Not dramatic, not wild, just a steady presence, pattering on rooftops, soaking the footpaths, tracing silver lines down the walls of the clay huts. And with it comes the beetle calendar. You see it first near the central gathering house, an enormous granite disc half buried in the earth, polished to a shine by generations of hands and time. It looks like a sundial at first glance, but without a gnomon. Instead, it's covered in concentric circles and radiating lines, all carved with meticulous care. Dozens of tiny beetles are etched into the stone, each in a different posture or movement. Mulugeta watches you study it. This is the calendar, he says. 1 beetle for each week of the rain season. You kneel to get a better look. Each beetle glyph sits inside its own wedge, a segment of the disc, like a pie chart made by someone obsessed with symmetry. They're not repeated. No 2 beetles are alike. Some are mid-dig. Others are curled. A few have wings outstretched, carved in dizzying detail. Every year, Mulugeta explains, we start at the outer ring and move inward. As each week passes, we mark the beetle in that segment. If the rain matches its posture, we place a stone. If not, we wait. You notice smooth pebbles placed on several beetles already. The current one is a crouching posture, antennae tucked. That's the listener, he says. Rain with wind from the east. You glance at the sky. Wind tickles your face. From yes, precisely that direction. What happens if the pattern breaks, you ask? Then we consult the dream record, he replies. Naturally, the calendar is more than symbolic. It's a living weather archive. Every stone placed becomes part of the village's seasonal record. If 3 weeks in a row match the beetle's pattern, it's considered a sign of harmony. If not, adjustments are made to planting, to storage, to prayer. Historians who've studied such calendars often argue about their purpose. Some claim they're mnemonic devices for seasonal changes. Others see them as primitive forecasting tools. But no one denies their beauty or their complexity. You notice something strange near the center of the disc, a tiny beetle alone in a smooth blank ring. No glyph, no symbol, just a shallow depression in the shape of a beetle that's been worn smooth. Mulugeta's voice softens. That one is the questioner. You raise an eyebrow. What does it predict, he smiles. Nothing. It's the week when we don't ask. You pause, unsure if he's being literal. That's when we observe, only, he adds. No interpretation, no jars, no dreams. Just silence. Sometimes the earth needs to speak uninterrupted. It feels oddly profound. You spend the afternoon watching as children clean the disc with soft brushes, elders place this week's stone, and a young girl rings a set of small bells to mark the passing of time. It's not ceremony. It's just maintenance. A quiet act of continuity. Mulugeta shows you a record tablet carved to mirror the disc. For each year, a small replica is made from clay or slate, then stored in a cool hut near the jars. The oldest one dates back over a century. The beetle glyphs were simpler, then less posture, more symbol. But the pattern is the same. Outer ring inward, week by week. One day, he says, we'll reach the center of this disc. It was carved 100 years ago. We still have 28 beetles to go. What happens when you reach the middle? He shrugs. We make another. Or we wait to see if the beetles give us a new pattern. That evening, you watch as Mulugeta places a new stone, this one black and flat, on the week's beetle. There's a short hum from the elders, a single phrase spoken in unison. We mark not the weather, but the walk. And then everyone disperses. Later, you dream of beetles arranged in perfect rings spiraling inward toward something bright. Appetit. Ordryrix. Nigh. Ordis archidre. Napalverts warn my comoisier. A sun you can't tell. But they're walking with purpose. Always walking. The rains are reliable now. They come in the afternoons, steady and dense, rinsing the dust from the village rooftops and coaxing shy green shoots from the soil. It's as if the land, after weeks of negotiation, has decided to cooperate again. You wake one morning to find yourself being summoned not to the jars or the stones, but to a house you've never entered. It's small and squat with walls painted in faded patterns of beetle wings and concentric spirals. A child greets you at the door and leads you inside, where a woman, in her 60s, sits cross-legged on the floor, shelling nuts into a wide basket. She looks up with sharp eyes. You've come to see the readers. The readers. You nod slowly. She smiles. Good. We've been waiting. What follows is an unexpected kind of introduction. Her name is Jeanette, and her family by unbroken tradition has served as the beetle watchers of the southern quadrant for 30 generations. Every season they observe. Every moon cycle they record. Their job isn't to interpret. It's to watch, document, archive. They are the data keepers. She gestures toward a low wooden shelf stacked with layers of folded cloth and bark scrolls. One by one, she and her daughter unwrap them. You're stunned by what you see. Each scroll is a season. Each mark a beetle. Tiny dots trace the beetle's movements, curved lines, abrupt turns, even patterns of hesitation, little gaps between steps. Each trail is dated, labeled by moon phase and soil condition. No one writes these things down. Jeanette says, not like this, but we do. Quietly. Some records go back a century past, from mother to daughter, uncle to nephew. Every reader learns to draw with beetle legs dipped in ink. Yes, actual beetles. They use small sticks coated in local pigments, mimicking beetle paths by watching and then tracing exactly what was seen. We do not interpret, she repeats. If the beetle stops, we draw a dot. If it spins, we draw a spiral. If it flips over and dies, we draw a flat line. That's all. You marvel at the simplicity, the discipline. In a world where everyone wants answers, here is a family trained to only record questions. Their hut smells like cedar smoke and old soil. A breeze rustles the wool, hanging that depicts a beetle inside a spiral inside a square. Jeanette explains, this means the season folded in on itself. Rains came early, then stopped, then returned. You ask if these records are shared with the rest of the village. Only when asked, she replies. Our work is not to lead, only to remind. You can't help but notice how their scrolls resemble musical scores, each line a melody, each pattern a rhythm of the earth made visible. The beetles, she says, are the musicians. They play the weather before it arrives. Jeanette shows you a particularly old scroll, the Rain Dance Ledger of season 247. It's faded but intact. She traces her fingers across a looping trail with 4 dots, evenly spaced along it. Here, she says, we knew the rain would break for exactly 4 days. And it did. She nods. We weren't sure, but we prepared. We warned the potters to cover their clay. We told the children to collect stones for runoff ditches. You ask if they ever get it wrong. Always, she says with a smirk. But not always the same way. She lifts a newer scroll and points to a pattern that looks like pure chaos lines, looping wildly, colliding, circling back. This was 2 seasons ago, she explains. The beetles gave us nonsense, and then the season gave us nothing. She leans in. When the beetles can't agree, we prepare for confusion. You realize that this family is more than record keepers. They're pattern historians. Their work sits at the strange crossroads of science, instinct, and reverence. They do not claim to understand the beetles, but they remember what the beetles did. And over time, that memory becomes wisdom. Historians outside this world rarely acknowledge such roles. To the outside eye, these people are simply rural observers, illiterate in the modern sense. But you know now that literacy takes many forms. Janet gives you a scroll to keep an extra. She says, "It's from this season, a single Beetle's walk, rendered in curved ink, labeled with the word hesitation." A note is tucked into the corner first full moon. Humidity rose early. You thank her, and she smiles, tapping her forehead with 2 fingers. Now you're a reader, too. You carry the scroll back to your hut, careful not to smudge the ink. That night, as you listen to the rain rattle the thatch roof and the distant hum of jars singing in the wind, you study the path again. And, for the first time, you're not looking for meaning. You're just remembering the shape of a journey. Days pass. The rains continue, now steadier, more rhythmic, less uncertain. You begin to recognize the mood of each downpour. Some arrive bold and insistent, slapping rooftops and filling jars in minutes. Others sneak in soft as whispers, seeping into the ground like apologies. The land once brittle and tight now breathes easily. Green fuzz clings to every ledge. And yet, not everyone agrees on what this all means. One afternoon, you're invited to climb the ridge just beyond the Beetle calendar, where sky meets stone and the air carries the clean scent of moss and cloud. There beneath a wind-twisted fig tree, you find a group gathered on mats, surrounded by scrolls, beetle jars, and a strange tension. Mulugeta introduces you with a nod. Today, we listen to disagreement. At the center of the group sits an entomologist from the capital. Yes, a real scientist, lab-trained clipboard, in hand khaki shirt somehow still unwrinkled. Across from him is Jeanette, the reader from the scroll house, her expression calm but unreadable. Between them, a beetle in a shallow clay dish methodically tracing a triangle. "I've recorded this behavior multiple times," the scientist says. "It correlates to increased soil temperature, not humidity." Jeanette replies evenly. "And yet every triangle this season came 2 days before a flood. You settle in. This is the forum. Once every season, the village hosts a debate, not the loud kind, but a structured conversation where elder scientists, priests, and watchers bring their observations into shared space. No hierarchy, no winner, just ideas offered like gifts." A boy presents a chart made from yarn marking beetle trail frequency against moon phases. A woman reads a dream involving a beetle with wings of ash. The scientist offers soil data pressure logs and barometric graphs. Someone mutters, "Too much paper, not enough dirt." Another replies, "Too much memory, not enough proof." Mulugeta leans toward you. "This is how we sharpen." There's no anger here, just tension, the kind born when 2 types of truth collide. The scientist argues that beetles respond to stimuli, not symbols. That their behavior, however fascinating, is rooted in chemistry and evolutionary triggers. They're not predicting, he says. They're reacting. Janet folds her hands. "So are we." He pauses. "I suppose that's fair." Someone stands and reads from a scroll recorded 50 years ago, a season when the beetles refused to dig despite rising humidity and textbook storm conditions. The scientist frowns. "That's an anomaly." Janet smiles. "Everything is until it happens again." You begin to understand that the purpose of the forum isn't to find one answer, but to hold space for many. To acknowledge that weather is both data and story. That beetles are both insects and messengers. That truth like wind shifts depending on where you're standing. Historians still argue whether such gatherings were traditions of scientific inquiry or communal myth-making. But here, you witness something more nuanced, a willingness to let multiple explanations exist at once. By dusk, no conclusions have been reached, and that's fine. The scientist packs up his notes, thanks everyone politely, and accepts a jar of fermented tea from one of the elders. Before he leaves, he pauses beside you. They really believe the beetles know things he says. You reply, "And yet you brought your instruments here." He smiles a little sheepishly. Touché. That night, the forum ends with a quiet ceremony. No dancing, just silence beneath the stars, broken only by the rustling of beetles in their jars and the occasional distant rumble. Not thunder, but perhaps a rock slide or something deeper. Mulugeta tells you this is the custom. When minds meet, the earth must be allowed to speak next. So no predictions for 3 days. No readings. Just observation. You lie awake that night thinking of Janae and the scientist, of triangle trails and weather graphs, of spirals in dreams and humidity sensors in dirt. And you wonder maybe there's a third language. Not belief, not measurement, but attention. A kind of listening that includes both doubt and wonder. You fall asleep with the Beetle scroll beside your mat, the ink now smudged slightly from your fingers. But the trail still visible, still winding. It's your final week in the village, though no one marks it that way. Time here doesn't follow your calendar. It bends around the reins, the Beetles, the cycles of watching and waiting. Still, you begin to sense the quiet closure in things. A planting completed a pattern. Resolved a trail finished. The sky is soft today, milky clouded but not threatening. The air is warm and wet, and everything smells like turned soil and wood smoke. As you pack your satchel with gifts, you didn't ask for Herb's scroll scraps a carved beetle, no larger than a fingernail. Mulugeta finds you. There's one more place, he says. Before you go, you follow him past the fields beyond the last hut and down a path hidden between two thick clusters of fig trees. The ground here is different, cushioned quieter. Moss-covered stones peek out beneath your feet. Eventually, the trees open into a shaded clearing. At its center stands a flat stone slab, ringed with tiny beetle-sized holes. A shrine, but not for worship. It's a burial ground. For the readers, Mulugeta says softly, and the Beetles. You kneel, brushing your hand across the stone. Faint markings cover its surface names in local script, some beetle glyphs etched beside them. A spiral, a figure 8, a simple dot. They are buried together, he adds, those who gave their lives to listening, and the Beetles who walked with them. He points to one symbol near the edge, a set of concentric rings drawn so faintly you almost miss it. That one belonged to the priest, who first recorded the dream of thunder crawling through the grass. You remember that story. Janet told it one evening over tea. A dream so vivid it came true the next day, storm clouds rolling low, flashing blue at the roots of trees, lightning that didn't strike but slid. You sit for a long while. There's no speech, no ceremony, just the rustling trees and the sound of something digging faintly nearby. You turn your head and see it, a beetle moving in gentle arcs, carving shallow tracks in the dirt as if paying its respects. Or perhaps simply continuing its walk. People ask if we believe in Beetles, Mulugeta says. But that's not the question. You glance at him. The question is, do we believe in paying attention? He crouches beside you and places a palm against the burial stone. Most people walk too loudly to hear what's already speaking. It's not a condemnation, just a quiet truth. Historians often omit sites like this, small, unmarked places of memory. They focus on temples, fortresses, coins. But the archives here are etched in dirt, in repetition, in humility. These burial stones carry no grandeur, only gratitude. Before you leave, Mulugeta places a smooth stone on the slab's edge. For the one still walking, he says. You add one beside it. As you walk back through the Thay, you feel lighter, not with relief, but with resonance. Like you've been tuned gently to a different frequency. One that vibrates lower, slower, closer to the earth. Later that evening, you sit with Jenna by the fire, drinking something warm and thick, tasting of cardamom and dust. She asks if you'll remember the trails. I think so, you say. She nods satisfied. Then they won't disappear. You realize then that memory is the currency here. Not gold, not grain. Memory passed through fingers across scrolls beneath soil. Beetles don't need to know why they walk. But if you watch long enough, their walking becomes a language, a code, a prayer. And when you leave the next morning, no one gathers to say goodbye. No one makes a show. You simply rise, pack your things, and begin your own trail one step at a time. But just before the last bend in the path, you glance back. And there on the edge of the road, a single beetle moves slowly. One circle. A pause. Then west. You don't see the village disappear behind you. You feel it. Like a pulse fading under the skin. Like warmth lingering in a cooled mug. Like the hush of something that's still happening, just not where you can watch it anymore. The path bends, and the trees close in gently around you. Your satchel swings against your hip, heavier now. Not with things, but with meanings. The scroll from Jeanette. The seal from Mulugeta. A vial of dried beetle tracks, pressed into sap. A smooth stone from the burial shrine. And something else. A weightless trail laid in your thoughts. At first, you expect your ears to tune back into your world, the rumble of distant traffic, the chirp of your phone, the hum of expectation. But the silence clings. In the best way. You set up camp near a trickling stream just before dusk, the sky low and gray. Rain threatens, then hesitates. You smile at its indecision. Somewhere a beetle is probably predicting what this cloud might do. You spread your mat on the soft earth and sit cross-legged, scroll in your lap. The one Jeanette gave you. You've read it a dozen times already, but you unroll it again. Hesitation. 3 steps. A pause. One long line into the left corner. It doesn't tell you anything concrete, but it feels like something. It feels familiar now. Later, as darkness falls, you lie down and close your eyes. And in the space between thoughts and sleep, something unfolds. Not a dream. Not quite. But a sequence. You are walking not on 2 legs, but 6. The ground vibrates gently beneath you, filled with quiet pulses as if the earth is dreaming too. You follow a path of scent, of softness, of pressure. There are no signs, no words, only the sense of direction without knowing the destination. You walk in a spiral. You dig, and then you rest. Your antennae twitch at something distant, lightning, rain, or the beat of a drum made from clay and silence. You wake just as a single drop lands on your cheek. It's raining. Soft, quiet, intentional. You open your eyes to the sound of water brushing leaves, tapping your tarp, slipping into the cracks of rock. The Beatles would call this the listening rain. And you do. You listen. Not for words, not for symbols, but for motion. Because now you know the weather is not just around you. It's beneath you. It's in the trail, in the line between this step and the next. You sip the morning from the hollow of your hand and begin walking again, not toward a place but through it, as if to continue a spiral someone else started long ago. And you feel it with each footfall, the rhythm of a beetle's path. Slow, deliberate, true. The sky fades to deep blue, then to velvet. The earth is quiet now. The beetles have returned to their burrows tucked beneath, layers of damp soil, and roots' legs folded, antennae gently curled like commas, resting mid-sentence. You lie back and listen, not to a voice, but to presence. The gentle hush of a land exhaling. The distant patter of rain softening the edge of everything. The occasional rustle of leaves shifting slightly in their sleep. You are not where you were, but the path remains with you. It lives now in the way you slow your breath, in the way you notice that stillness can speak, that the tiniest motion a beetle's turn, a droplet's pause, might carry the very weather we seek. You remember the spirals, the jars, the dreams, the glyphs you couldn't read until your bones learned to trace them. You remember the sound of a jar humming in the dark. And now, here in this quiet, it all lingers. Each step that follows will carry a trail beneath it. Each pause will be a mark, a moment, a message. So close your eyes. Let the echoes of beetle legs lull you into sleep. Let the soil beneath you cradle your weight as if you are just another creature learning to listen. You've walked far. You've watched closely. And now, you rest. Let the rain speak to you in droplets. Let the wind carry a lullaby in Earth's own tongue. And if you dream tonight, may it be of soft trails under a full moon, of jars that hum, of spirals that never end,